Hello, everyone. Let me get my presentation up here. Okay. Let it load. Okay, so this week and in the next coming weeks in our next unit, we're going to be talking about World War I, what was happening before the First World War, what was happening in preparation of it, during it, and kind of the after causes after the war was kind of declared over. And for today's mini lesson, it's going to be a quick just overview of the upcoming unit, meaning I'm going to go over some really broad ideas in not very in a not very specific way, but it's to help you kind of understand what we're going to be learning about in the next coming weeks and for your next assessment. So this is for my world history classes, periods 1, 5, and 7. So like I said, this is an overview. It's nothing you should be, if you're overwhelmed, that's okay. Okay, so what did society look like before World War I? So this is Europe in 1914, and there is tensions brewing in the European region. And this is just because of a lot of different factors in these imperial powers, such as France, the United Kingdom, Russia, Austria-Hungary, Germany, and Italy. And this also includes the political instability in the Balkans, specifically with Serbia and them wanting to take over the Balkan area. So during this time, US was also an economic superpower. Obviously, they're not in this European region, but I thought it would be very relevant to include that US was doing very well during this time. So essentially, right before there was any declarations of war, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, a part of the Austria-Hungarian Empire, was assassinated along with his wife Sophie. And this assassination kind of sparked war tensions between we'll talk about the two powers during this time. So next, we have two different sides during this time. We have the Central Powers and the Allied Powers. So the Central Powers are Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire has not fallen during this time, so they're still a part of the world and in this region. So Germany and Austria-Hungary had aligned themselves secretly so that Russia would not know, because Germany was afraid that Russia would find out. Germany declared themselves with Austria-Hungary very early, and Austria-Hungary wanted to declare war because of their assassination of the Archduke. And the Allied powers were then Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, Romania, Canada, Japan, and the US. So it does look like the Allied powers have a bigger, more powers, more allies to them, but don't be alarmed. Central power is still strong, even with fewer people on its side. So essentially, researchers and analysis and historians have came up kind of with this acronym called MAIN. And these are the kind of four broad causes of World War I. And we're going to talk about these very briefly today, as this is a mini lesson. But in the next coming weeks, we will focus on specifics of each of these parts of the MAIN acronym. So MAIN stands for militarism. So this means that military preparation and having a big military that's competing with others is a very big idea during this time. People really, or countries and regions are really interested in having a military. Alliances is where one country agrees with another country to kind of help each other out during hard times, good times, in times of need also. Imperialism is kind of this broad spectrum of nations conquering other nations economically and politically. So this is like the US was an imperial nation, UK or Great Britain France, they're trying to conquer colonies and places in Africa. And it's just imperialism is still important during this time period. And then we have nationalism, so pride for one's country. You're proud to be a citizen of your country. You're very you're devoted to your country. And so these four features of the main acronym and what can be said to be causes of the World War One, we'll go through each part right now. So for militarism, during this time period, there's a lot of military competition, and these nations thought that war was good for their country. They, it can create either a lot of money or it may not create a lot of money in their country. So during this time, there was a huge arms race between Germany and Great Britain. Germany wanted to increase their naval power because they didn't have much during this time. Great Britain, as we all know, from our previous unit, has the biggest navy in the world. There are not many other places can compete with them. So Germany wanting to create this navy is going to create these two tensions between these two countries. So for alliances, there's two main alliances prior to World War One. And these are what's kind of creating tensions leading up to World War One. So the first alliance that was created in 1882 linked Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy together. And as you see here, Italy is part of Germany, Austria-Hungary. That will kind of flip through World War One, and we'll talk about that through the next coming weeks. And then to like a retaliation of that, in 1907, the Triple Entente was France, Britain, and Russia. And another alliance that I want to briefly go over was the US alliance. And we'll talk about this too further in the unit. And this was the sinking of the Lusitania ship. And this was basically a ship that was carrying US passengers, innocent US passengers, through the British Isle waters. And during kind of these tensions and kind of war breaking out, the US was not involved. But Germany had declared these waters not a neutral zone, but a war zone. So when Germany saw this Lusitania ship in the British Isles, their submarines sank it and it killed a lot of people. So this one specific event kind of jump-started the US going with the Allied powers and going against Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Central Powers. And then we have imperialism. So this is like expanding empires. These countries want to create alliance with each other to conquer places in Africa, colonies in Africa. And these are obviously creating tensions in the region. And this is what's kind of putting brick by brick these kind of bad blood between these countries during leading up to the World War One. And then we have nationalism. So nationalism and imperialism clash prior to World War One. And this is because specifically the Balkans are being pursued by Serbia. And the Balkans have so many different nationalities, and Serbia wants to take this over and take it for themselves. And so obviously the Balkans and the powers that line themselves with the Balkans are wanting to keep their pride in their country. And so these are really going to clash during this time. And this is really a building block leading up to World War One. And this one's kind of complex to understand, so we'll talk about it in the next coming weeks too. So wrapping up, I want to show you a quick video of kind of what we've been talking about.
What caused the devastating First World War? You may be aware of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This was, in fact, the trigger which set off the war from a number of underlying causes. These were militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism. Militarism created an arms race out of competition and fear of neighboring nations. Germany tried to compete in a naval race with Britain, building more and more ships. Alliances were created to check the balance of power between nations. In 1882, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy formed the Triple Alliance. France, Britain, and Russia reacted in 1907 by creating the Triple Entente. Imperialism caused another type of competition and disagreement. The British and French empires made Germany jealous as it tried to colonize parts of Africa. Nationalism created the feeling that countries were better than others and promoted the anti Austro Hungarian sentiments in Serbia. 7 young Bosnian Serbs.
Okay, we'll stop there. So this, like I said, was a very complex issue, and kind of there's a lot of pieces to um, this war and leading up to it. And so we can't, it looks simple on the outside, but what we have to understand is that there's so many different small and big pieces to it that it's not as simple as it looks. So we will talk about all this. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, that's totally understandable. We'll also talk about in the next coming weeks who won and kind of what happened afterwards, and how this was leading up to World War II. And specifically, we'll talk about why we need to go back and study these different parts in history and in the world's history, because it's so important to see um, what has previously happened and how it's affected us now and even in the last couple decades. Um, so thank you so much for listening to this mini lesson. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or send me a quick chat on Canva. I appreciate you all listening, and I hope you guys have a great afternoon.